Sky-high inflation, China's economy and banking system collapsing, European energy crisis, supply chain shortages, historically high labor cost, impending housing crisis, Russian war in Ukraine, and a worldwide recession. And what is the stock market doing? Rallying, of course. And the talking heads on television are in a fantasy world talking about as soon as the economy softens, the Fed's going to pivot and start easing interest rates. Are these people living in a fantasy world of
fairy tale economics?
Yes, of course they are. The lamestream media is full of commentators that are all trying to sell you something. All right? They're all money managers. They all have their businesses, their clients. Do you think they're going to come on television and tell you something different than they've been telling their clients for the last year? No, they're not. And they're all compromised because they have a certain narrative, and that narrative is structured to sell you stocks. As a result, you see bullishness in an overwhelming negative setup for stocks. So in this video, I want to discuss the 5 biggest fairy tales in today's stock market. Number 1 is that the Fed will pivot as soon as the economy weakens. All right, the reason this is fantasy and fairy tale is because the Fed is not in a position to do that, okay? Inflation is so far out of control that it's absolutely unbelievable. Okay, it was 9.1%, then it came down to 8.5%, but the core is still 5.9%. The Fed is not in any position to ease even if the economy weakens. And in fact, the reason they're raising interest rates is so the economy will weaken. So unless the economy weakens and inflation comes down dramatically, remember their target is 2%, they're not easing. They're not easing anytime soon. They might slow the pace of increases, but they're not going to slow anytime soon until the economy takes a big hit. Number 2, earnings will continue to rise in the face of rising interest rates and high inflation. This is a complete fantasy. And I've said this many times on this channel, but it's worth saying again. I don't care what business you're in, you can't grow your profits when your costs are exploding out of control and you can't even find people to hire to operate your business. And wages are going up, everything's going up, energy costs, etc., everything. You cannot maintain your profit margins under that kind of scenario. You've seen already sales decline, you've seen demand destruction. All the retail companies are reporting sales declines. Manufacturing companies are reporting pressure on their margins, and it's just a natural common sense thing if you think about it. Why people can't understand this and get it through their thick skulls, so to speak, I don't understand, but that's where we are. There's still way too much bullishness around, and we'll see what happens in September and October when I believe you're going to see another nasty sell-off. Number 3, the Fed can engineer a soft landing. I don't even know what a soft landing means. I guess that's a mild recession, but that ain't going to work this time, guys. I mean, if inflation was 3%, maybe you could do that, but they are going to have to continue to raise interest rates and tighten credit through quantitative tightening, which means reducing their balance sheet. They are going to have to do this very dramatically to impact and dislodge from the system this completely endemic inflation. Number 4, focusing exclusively on the United States economy. Okay? This is an enormous mistake for you to do as an investor because it is very short-sighted and it completely ignores what's going on in the rest of the world, which is a complete disaster. For example, Europe is in the midst of a horrendous energy crisis, okay? They also have high inflation. So their economy is going to get completely crushed, people, okay? This is not an isolated event. This is going to affect the entire world. We're all in an energy crisis, and we all have high inflation. So it's not limited to the United States. Have you checked out what's going on in China recently? China is undergoing enormous economic disruption due to their zero COVID policy, right? Due to completely irresponsible lending in the real estate area. And you've seen this in, massive defaults in all these real estate companies. The government has had to come in and bail out the system. People are refusing to pay their mortgages. The government is preventing people from getting their money out of banks because of liquidity issues. China is a complete shit show, guys. And you got to keep your eye on that. China is a very significant portion of the world economy. And the last geopolitical issue is the Russia invasion of Ukraine. I mean, this is the biggest military conflict that Europe has seen since World War II. This is very significant. The U.S. is continuing to fund the Ukraine. Biden just announced another $3 billion going to them for military equipment. As long as the United States and NATO continue to fund Ukraine, this war is going to continue, and it's going to continue to put pressure on the oil and gas business and energy prices, and it's going to continue to be very disruptive, not only to Europe, but to the rest of the world. Now, the fifth one is my favorite one, and this is the idea that more government spending and raising taxes will actually reduce inflation. This is the biggest fairy tale of all, and it's brought to you by the Biden administration. Unless you've been asleep for the past few months, you may have noticed that the government just spent another $1 trillion, okay, between the infrastructure package and the
Inflation Reduction Act.
Yes, the Inflation Reduction Act. They actually said that with a straight face. And this spending, it's nothing more than more deficit spending. And they're spending that money on corporate welfare to green energy companies and car manufacturers that make EV vehicles. This is just, you couldn't make this up if you tried. It's one thing to spend money that you don't have, okay? I get that. Politicians love to do that because they're basically buying votes, or they think they're buying votes. But don't then call it the Inflation Reduction Act, okay? That insults our intelligence, but they don't care. So when you were a kid, you read a lot of fairy tales. Maybe your mother read you fairy tales, or your father, and you believed them. You believed in Santa Claus, you believed in the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny. But when you're an investor, you can't believe in fairy tales because you need to deal with reality. And I think in the coming months, everyone is going to get a healthy dose of reality, and it's not going to be pretty.